The richest man in the capital, Victor Lane, had been chasing me for 5 years, but I never even glanced at him, because to him, I was just one of many blind box wives he planned to collect. As long as you were chosen on the eve of his wedding, you'd become the richest man's wife, and I knew without a doubt, I was bound to be picked. I had already died once. In my previous life, I was the chosen bride, the one everyone envied. On our wedding day, he got drunk and missed a call from his adopted sister, the only woman he truly loved and mourned when she died suddenly, Julia Watson. That night, she died of a heart attack. The next morning, he dragged me to the morgue, grabbed my hair, and forced me to kneel down 1,000 times before her body. Why did you tamper with the lottery? You knew I loved Julia. If I had drawn the empty lot, I could have married her. He poured all his grief and anger onto me, blaming me for everything. In the end, he nailed me into a coffin, his coffin, and buried me alive. When I opened my eyes again, my body was whole, but it ached for 5 long years. This time, I vowed to change everything. I switched the blind box's order, so he would inevitably draw the empty lot. From then on, they could hate or love each other as much as they wanted, but it wouldn't concern me anymore. Victor's number is the empty lot. Gasps rippled through the crowd of 99 women. Everyone knew what this meant. Julia Watson was the one. The rest? They lost their chance to become the richest man's wife. Across the room, Victor's pupils flickered with excitement as he stood and rushed to embrace Jacqueline Smith. Jacqueline, this time I picked you. You're not allowed to run anymore. Jacqueline blushed and tried to push him away, but he held her tighter. He cupped her face with both hands, but his cold and sharp eyes flew to me. A chill ran down my spine. I instinctively straightened. Could it be Victor Lane had been reborn too? But even if he had, I owed him nothing. This time I gave him what he wanted. I was finally free. At the head table, Mrs. Lane cleared her throat lightly, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Victor, Auntie never imagined that out of 99 boxes, you'd actually draw the empty lot. Seems fate truly ties you and Jacqueline Smith. Victor's lips curled in satisfaction. Of course, he said, shooting me a challenging glance. As for the rest of these women, let them stay at the Lane estate until after our wedding as compensation. He thought I would fall apart, that I would cry, but I didn't. I smiled. I applauded, along with everyone else. I was about to return to pack my bags when I was dragged into a corner by Mrs. Lane. Before I could react, a stinging slap landed on my cheek. You wretched girl, she hissed. Didn't I tell you Victor would draw your number? Why did it end up being an empty lot? Another slap followed. My face burned from the blows, but not as much as my heart did. The day you married into the Lane family alongside that cheating brat Julia, that was the day you stopped being my daughter. Mrs. Lane's eyes turned vicious. If anything happens to Julia because of you, I swear you will pay with your life. In my previous life, I had been nailed into a coffin and buried alive. Only then did I realize the results of the blind box had been rigged all along. Of course, Mrs. Lane had wanted Julia to marry into a wealthy family, but she also needed to help Julia hide a secret. And me, I had been the victim of that secret. Now, I wanted nothing more than to sit back and watch them tear each other apart. Their secrets had nothing to do with me anymore. I rubbed my swollen cheek, my gaze flat and emotionless. I'll be marrying James Byrne. Consider it repayment for the money you spent keeping my father alive all these years. Her expression wavered. James Byrne was a notorious figure in this city's social circles. That man rumored to lack any moral compass. His temper was unpredictable, and whispers said he indulged both men and women alike. He was infamous for his countless lovers, with some rumors claiming as many as 800. And now, he happened to be searching for a wife to bring home. If I didn't make a choice myself, Mrs. Lane would surely marry me off to a beggar or brute. So I chose James Byrne first, because I already knew he was far from the simple playboy everyone thought he was. Mrs. Lane smiled coldly. All right, good daughter, then wait quietly to be married off. She turned and stormed off, twisting her waist with each step. I let out a breath. My room was at the far west end of the Lane estate, and I had to pass through the garden to get there. At that moment, the garden was in an uproar. Jessie was covering her mouth, sneezing softly. Victor, my brother, she whined. Who planted all this lavender? Don't they know that I'm allergic? Victor gently held his handkerchief to her nose, full of concern. Then he turned to the gardener and ordered, mow down all the lavender in this field. That patch of lavender had been picked off the roadside by my father, back when he was sober. He used to say, when I'm gone, the flowers are too. When I was 5, my father had fallen critically ill. I had run away to the Lane family, begging Mrs. Lane to help him. She had wanted to kick me out until Mr. Lane intervened. She can stay, he had said. We can afford to raise a few charity cases. And so, I lived in the Lane family's shadow for 20 years. Victor had once taken me quiet, withdrawn me to play with the servants' children. He had even said, the Lane family will always be your home. The lush lavender was fed into the grass crusher, turning into purple juice. No, I screamed, desperately lunging forward and clutching whatever I could. James Byrne, startled, let go of Julia Watson, who stumbled back and hit a tree trunk. Are you crazy? His eyes were red with fury as he pulled me away until he noticed what I held in my palm, a crushed flower and a broken, rotting wooden plaque. You, he started. Tears burst from my eyes. You said you couldn't sleep well. That's why I planted the lavender. My dad gave it to me to help you sleep. The wooden plaque crumbled in my hand as I held it out to him. James, I don't have a home anymore. He froze, reaching out as if to embrace me, but then a scream pierced the air. It was Julia. A cluster of caterpillars had fallen from the birdhouse I'd made, right onto her. James flinched and rushed forward, pulling Julia away. The caterpillars carried mild toxins, but James Byrne used his bare hands to pick them out of her hair. When he turned back to me, his eyes were full of disgust. Almost fooled me with your act. Like throwing bugs, huh? Fine. Fine, all of you, stuff the bugs on the ground into her clothes. Several maids hurried to obey, scooping up the caterpillars. The gardener grabbed me, holding me tightly. I didn't do it. How could it be me? At first, I still clung to the memory of the Gray family's kindness and wanted to warn him that Julia was hiding a secret, but now I regretted it. I wanted to see him lose it when the truth came out. So I stopped struggling and let the caterpillars crawl all over me. The spots they touched reddened, swelled, and itched unbearably. Julia finally calmed down and gently tugged on James's sleeve. He carried Julia and walked away, leaving me behind. My body gave out and I collapsed onto the ground. My fingers had dug deep into the soil from trying to endure the pain, mud and blood coating my skin. Because of James' burn, no one came to help me. I endured the nausea and pain, finally throwing off the caterpillars and staggering to the family doctor. Inside, I saw James behind a curtain, applying medicine to Julia. Though it was just a simple treatment, Julia gasped dramatically. By the time he pulled the curtain back, Julia was limp in his arms and his fingers were still wet with medicine. James glanced at my red, swollen, festering neck and tossed a bottle of potion at me. I was a second too slow. The glass shattered on the floor, spilling the liquid everywhere. I knelt on the floor, half covered in dirt, applying the potion with my mud-stained hands. James, I'm leaving the Gray family. 9-year-old James once promised to give me a home, but now that home was gone, and it was time for me to say goodbye. Jacqueline Smith, he sneered. That vegetable father of yours, is he giving up treatment? His voice had a threatening edge that made me freeze. Memories from my past life made me tremble. He had once embraced me, only to push me into a coffin with those same cold hands. It was a pity. No matter how possessive James Byrne once was, he never imagined I'd soon marry someone else. I returned to the room I'd lived in for 20 years. I tried to pack like some fictional heroine from a novel I'd once read, but quickly realized none of it belonged to me. The dark wedding chamber was plastered wall to wall with photos of Julia, secretly taken by a private investigator, all obsessively. I stuffed my documents into my pocket and sat dazed at the edge of the bed. My phone vibrated, a message from the hospital caretaker. Miss Audrey, your father just regained some consciousness. He's calling your name. I limped to the hospital. I sat beside the bed, holding his hand tightly. I'm leaving the Gray family. Those people, they'll have nothing to do with me anymore. I bowed my head and let the tears fall freely. I've been looking everywhere for you, and here you are, crying over a dying man. Julia stood at the doorway, arms crossed, swaying her hips with a smirk. She tilted her chin arrogantly. I heard Mommy say you're planning to marry that pervert? I didn't respond. I just stared at her, wary. It shouldn't be my business if you want to marry a beggar, she sneered. But I heard you know my secret? How can I be sure you won't say anything? If you do, James will leave me. Her eyes turned red as she spoke. Only if you're dead can I finally feel at ease. With that, a blade slipped from her sleeve and flashed toward me. I instinctively leaned back, falling straight onto my dad's unmoving body. Julia didn't look soft at all. With the blade clenched between her fingers, she aimed directly for my throat. But suddenly, a dry, pale hand caught her wrist. The monitors around us beeped erratically. The doctor had said that a patient might wake up if the machines made a sound like that. I whipped around in shock. Dad? He didn't open his eyes, but his hand firmly stopped Julia from hurting me. No, you touch my daughter, came his hoarse, broken whisper. I couldn't believe it. His hand still held firm. Footsteps echoed down the hallway fast, heavy and familiar. In a flash, Julia cut her fingertip with the blade and slipped it into my father's hand. Tears streamed down her face. Don't kill me. The next second, James burst into the room. She flew into his arms like she'd found a life raft. James, my sister's father tried to kill me. I just heard he was waking up and wanted to see him. Did Julia do something wrong? Then she clutched her forehead and staggered back, her performance flawless. James glanced at her, his expression hardening. He looked at the blade in my father's limp hand, and his jaw clenched. Good, very good. Without another word, he walked over and unplugged my dad's respirator. I lunged forward and tried to plug it back in, but he shoved me away. Stop, James. Please, I'm begging you. My dad will die without the ventilator. James stared down at me like I was dirt beneath his shoes. Don't think I don't know that a vegetable won't die just because the ventilator is off for 10 minutes. I'm just punishing you. He pulled out his phone and called the hospital staff to cut power to the ward, specifically just this room for 10 minutes. Then he picked up Julia Watson, like she weighed nothing, and turned back one last time. 10 minutes later, the power returned. I immediately reconnected the ventilator. The screen flickered, then steadied, into a flat line. He was gone. My dad, who had been left like a dog in that bed for years, was dead. I sat on the cold hospital floor, arms wrapped around my knees, eyes swollen and burning from crying. And then, I heard footsteps again. I looked up, my vision blurred. Do me a favor? I whispered. I didn't know what I was trying to prove anymore, but James Byrne organized a wedding more lavish than I'd ever dared to dream. Jacqueline's wedding dress shimmered, thousands of sparkling gems stitched into the fabric, dazzling under the lights. When James entered the grand hall, his gaze instinctively swept the crowd, but he didn't see me in the seat reserved for me. Where is Julia? James frowned. It suddenly struck him. Mrs. Lane was also Jacqueline's mother. So, he made his way across the venue to find her. Mrs. Lane stood smiling, chatting lightly on the phone with Mr. Morgan. Why isn't Julia here today? At his words, Mrs. Lane and Mr. Morgan exchanged a strange, meaningful glance. And just like that, James felt a jolt in his chest, an inexplicable pain. The next second, Mrs. Lane raised her phone. The dim screen lit up, and what James saw burned into his mind forever.